The silver service pin pinned to my left lapel was not an ornament. It was a ghost. Look at her. My cousin Julian's voice sliced through the hum of crystal stemware, dropping like venom into the silence of 39 seated guests and 2 standing waiters. Showing up to a 6-figure family engagement dinner wearing a surplus store costume? Did you buy that brass tin on eBay, Clara? Or did you steal it from a pawn shop after they kicked you out of the logistics unit? The dining room of the Grand Regency Hotel went dead quiet, 39 eyes locking onto the tarnished metal on my coat. I didn't flinch, but my right thumb instinctively traced the faint notch carved in the back of the metal casing, a mark left by a sniper shrapnel in a mud-choked trench 4 years ago. If this story makes your blood boil and you believe respect is earned through sacrifice, take a second to hit subscribe, because what Julian didn't know was that every word coming out of his mouth was being recorded on a tactical collar mic wiretapped directly to a federal server. My mother, sitting to my left, lowered her head, her hand trembling as she reached for her wineglass. "Julian, please," she whispered, her voice cracked with a forced, pathetic fragility. "She's had a hard time adjusting since the discharged records were finalized." "Discharged?" Julian scoffed, standing up and tapping his sterling spoon against his champagne glass. "Let's be honest with everyone here tonight, Aunt Eleanor. She wasn't discharged. She was quietly removed for gross negligence. She lost an entire transport manifest in Sector 4. Isn't that right, Clara? You couldn't handle the strain, so you ran back home to live off your mother's pension while the rest of us actually build something of value." I looked down at my plate, watching the reflection of the chandelier dance in the untouched sauce. I could have spoken. I could have told the 41 people in this room that the transport manifest wasn't lost. It was deleted from the central archive by an admin override code that belonged to Julian's private logistics firm. But if I opened my mouth now, the entire sting operation would collapse before the signal bounced to the surveillance van parked 3 blocks away. "She doesn't deny it," Julian's fiancé Vanessa purred, smoothing down her silk dress. "It's honestly disrespectful to the actual service members in our family to wear a fake pin to a formal gathering just for attention." "It's not fake," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper, keeping my eyes fixed on the silver pin. "Then prove it," Julian snapped, stepping toward my chair, his polished Italian leather shoes clicking against the hardwood. I didn't pull back. I let his hand hover there, counting the seconds in my head. 3, 2, 1, waiting for the friction to break. "Touch that metal, son, and you'll be answering to a court-martial before the dessert course is served." The voice didn't come from me. It came from the head table at the back of the private room, a table that had remained dark and quiet since the dinner began. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a deep blue dress uniform slowly stood up, his 4 star-shaped insignias on his shoulders caught the overhead light, throwing cold, sharp glints across the room. Brigadier General Arthur Vance pushed his chair back, his face carved out of granite, his eyes fixed entirely on Julian. Julian froze, his hand instantly retreating as his face paled. "General Vance, I'm sorry, sir. I was just making a point about family integrity. My cousin has been using fraudulent military credentials to—" "Your cousin," General Vance interrupted, his voice echoing with the dry, absolute authority of a man who commanded divisions, "is currently the lead intelligence strategist for the Department of Defense's Inspector General's office." A collective gasp rippled through the table. My mother's glass slammed down, spilling red wine across the white tablecloth like a fresh stain. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with my honor and everything to do with her own survival. "Strategist?" Julian laughed nervously, looking around the room for support, but the guests were suddenly staring at their laps. "General, with all due respect, there's been a mistake. Clara was dishonorably processed 4 years ago. My mother handled her paperwork through our family legal trust. We have the discharge records in our home safe."
"You have a forged PDF," General Vance said, taking a slow, deliberate step toward our table. He pulled a thick, leather-bound dossier from inside his jacket and set it heavily beside Julian's plate. "And the man who forged it was your father, 6 months before he passed away, to prevent Clara from accessing her late father's classified military trust fund." The room went dead, suffocatingly quiet. I looked at my mother. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. They were locked around her napkin, her knuckles turning chalk white. "Mom?" I asked softly, turning my head toward her. "Did you know about the trust fund?" She didn't look at me. "Clara, don't do this here," she whispered, her voice suddenly stripped of all warmth. "This is Julian's celebration." "Answer her," General Vance commanded, standing right behind Julian now. "Tell her why her father's estate was liquidated 3 weeks after she was deployed to the border. Tell her where the $2.4 million went, Eleanor." My mother squeezed her eyes shut. "It was for the family business. We were going under. Clara was in the field. She didn't need the money. She was provided for." "I was provided for?" I finally spoke up, my voice flat, cold, and steady. "I spent 14 months in an unheated outpost, eating emergency rations because the supply lines were diverted by a subcontractor company called Apex Logistics." "Your company, Julian." "That's a lie. Apex had nothing to do with tactical supply distribution." "Apex didn't," I said, pulling a small battered USB drive from my pocket, the second plant I had carried into this room, and placing it right beside the silver pin on the tablecloth. "But its shell subsidiary, Vanguard Transit, did. The same subsidiary that billed the Pentagon for 40 tons of cold weather equipment that never arrived." "You think a flash drive proves anything?" Vanessa sneered, her voice trembling despite her attempt at disdain. "This is a private dinner. You can't just come in here with fake accusations and disrupt our engagement." "This isn't a private dinner, Vanessa," General Vance said coldly. "This room was booked under a federal procurement warrant. Every person here was invited because every person here holds shares in Apex Logistics." The air left the room. 3 elderly uncles at the end of the table suddenly stood up, their faces pale. One of them reached for his coat. "I'd sit back down, Uncle Marcus. The doors locked automatically 3 minutes ago when the general stood up. Federal marshals are in the lobby." "You set us up?" Julian whispered, his arrogance finally cracking into sheer panic. He looked at my mother. "Aunt Eleanor, what is she talking about? You said she was broken. You said she didn't remember anything about the convoy." My mother buried her face in her hands, sobbing silently. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were the furious, trapped tears of a strategist whose entire board had been flipped upside down. "She remembered everything, Julian," General Vance said. "She just needed you to gather all 41 primary shareholders in one location so we could serve the asset forfeiture notices simultaneously. If we served you individually, you would have liquidated the offshore accounts in Grand Cayman before we could freeze them." Julian stumbled back a step, bumping into a waiter who didn't move an inch, a waiter whose stance was too rigid, whose hands were folded too neatly in front of his waist, a federal agent in disguise. "This is insane," Julian stammered, pulling out his phone with trembling fingers. "I'm calling our legal team. You can't hold us here on the word of a mentally unstable, disgraced officer." "Check your phone, Julian," I said, softly, picking up the silver pin from the table and finally pinning it back onto my lapel, not as a symbol of past service, but the active key to the encrypted drive in front of us. "There's no signal. The jammer was activated the second you made fun of this metal." He looked at his screen. 0 bars. "What is that metal, Clara?" Vanessa asked, her voice small now, stripped of all its high society bite. I looked at her, then at Julian, then at my mother, who still refused to meet my eyes. "This isn't a discharge medal," I said, my voice echoing clearly in the silent hall. "It's a Joint Chiefs Meritorious Unit citation. It was awarded to the team that spent 3 years tracking black market military supply diversions within domestic private contractors."
I leaned forward, looking Julian dead in the eye. I didn't lose that transport manifest in Sector 4, Julian. I planted it. I left it there so your company would steal it, sign for it, and route the funds through your father's estate. I've been building this case since the day my father died. Julian's phone slipped from his hands, hitting the carpet with a dull thud. You knew? 4 years ago? You knew about the trust fund?
I knew the night my father died, I replied, standing up slowly and smoothing down my jacket. He didn't leave his estate to the family business, Julian. He left it to me, with a specific clause. If any member of the family attempted to alter the trust, the entire capital would automatically transfer to a federal fraud investigation fund. My mother looked up, her face pale, eyes wide with horror. Clara, no, you wouldn't destroy your own family. I destroyed this family the day you traded my father's honor for a seat at this table, I said coldly. The heavy double doors of the private dining room clicked open. 4 uniformed federal marshals stepped inside, led by an agent carrying a stack of yellow arrest warrants. Julian Vance, Eleanor Vance, Marcus Vance. The lead agent began reading from the top document. As the marshals moved in, the room erupted into chaos, shouting, crying, chairs scraping against the floor as the 41 guests realized that every dollar they had invested in Apex Logistics was gone, frozen by the government, and traded for federal indictments. Julian didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at the little silver pin on my lapel as if seeing it for the very first time. It was never a joke, Julian, I whispered as I walked past him toward the exit. I stepped out into the cool night air, the heavy doors closing behind me, cutting off the noise of the panic inside. The street was quiet, lined with dark sedans waiting under the streetlights. Truth doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It just waits until the room is quiet enough for everyone to hear it collapse.